I prayed again last night, not with fancy words, not with perfect faith, just me, whispering into the dark, hoping heaven was still listening, but all I heard was silence. Have you ever been there? Not just feeling sad, but feeling empty, like you're standing at the edge of a cliff, screaming into the wind, and the wind just passes right through you. You pray, you wait, you hope, but no voice comes back, no answer, no sign, no movement. And somewhere deep inside, the question grows like a shadow. Is God really here, or have I been talking to myself? That kind of silence doesn't just make you question your prayers. It makes you question your worth. It makes you wonder if maybe you're too broken, too forgotten, too far gone. Because how could a loving God stay silent when you're falling apart? And then people around you, they mean well. They say things like, just have faith. God is working behind the scenes. Maybe he's testing you. But those words don't help when your chest feels like it's caving in. When you've begged God through tears, through sleepless nights, through panic attacks, through heartbreak, and still nothing. Just silence. If you're here right now, listening to this, it means one thing. You haven't given up, even if your voice is tired. Even if your soul is bruised, even if you're holding on by a thread, you're still here. And I want to tell you something you may not believe yet, but let it sink in. The silence is not a sign that God left. It might just be the place where he's drawing you closer than ever before. So stay. Don't click away. Don't shut this down. Because this isn't a sermon, it's not a lesson, it's a hand reaching through the dark to remind you you are not alone. And if this speaks to your heart, stay. You're not alone. I know what it feels like to carry pain so quietly that even your closest friends have no idea. You smile, you work, you laugh at the right moments. You say, I'm fine, when people ask. But deep down, your soul is aching. And when the day ends and the lights go out, it's just you and the silence again. That silence isn't peaceful, it's heavy. It presses on your chest like a weight you can't name. You lie in bed, looking up at the ceiling and wondering how something so invisible can hurt so deeply. You've asked yourself questions no one knows about. What if I'm not strong enough to keep going? What if this sadness never lifts? What if God stopped listening a long time ago? You've tried reading your Bible, but the words don't land. You've tried worship music, but it feels distant. You've even tried praying out loud, hoping your voice could somehow break through the barrier. But it's like throwing words into the wind. And that kind of loneliness, it changes you. You stop expecting joy. You lower your hopes. You start surviving instead of living. And maybe worst of all, you begin to believe that you're the only one who feels this way, but you're not. There are so many people walking through life with a silent storm inside them. People who laugh loud but cry harder when they're alone. People who show up for others but can't remember the last time someone truly showed up for them. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're the strong one for everyone else. Maybe you're the one who encourages, uplifts, and never complains. But now, you're running on empty, and no one sees it. Not because they don't care, but because you've become a master at hiding your pain. But hear this, God sees what no one else does. Every silent tear, every God please you whisper through gritted teeth, every moment you fight to keep going when everything inside you says, just give up. He sees it, and he hasn't looked away. You are not weak. You are not faithless, you are not forgotten. You are a soul in need of healing and not fixing, and healing takes time. It takes truth, and sometimes it starts right here. There's a moment when your prayers turn from words into desperation, when you're not asking for blessings anymore, you're begging for air. Not for things to get better, just to breathe again. And it's in that place, between prayer and silence, that something begins to shift inside you. You start wondering if maybe it's not just that God is quiet, but maybe he's disappointed in you. Maybe you've messed up too many times. Maybe you didn't pray the right way. Maybe you were too distant for too long, and now he's turned his face away. These thoughts don't come like a storm. They come like whispers. Little by little, they chip away at your faith, until the God you once believed in, the one full of mercy, grace, and nearness, starts to feel like a stranger, like a judge watching from a distance, waiting for you to get it together. You try to fight those thoughts. You quote verses. You remember sermons. But none of it feels true anymore, because you're not in a church pew. You're in a battle with your own mind. And it's messy and confusing and silent. You start to ask the real questions, that the ones you never said out loud. If God is with me, why can't I feel him? If he loves me, why does this hurt so much? If he's sovereign, then why did he let it get this far? And underneath all of it, there's a quiet shame, a voice that says, good Christians don't feel like this. Real believers don't doubt like this. You should be stronger by now. But can I say something that might break that lie wide open? Even Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Even he, the sinless one, felt the weight of silence, the sting of absence. You are not less spiritual because you're struggling. You are not broken beyond repair because you're questioning. You are a human with a soul that aches to be heard. And just because heaven feels quiet doesn't mean it's closed. Sometimes the silence isn't God's rejection. It's the space where he's preparing you to hear what words can't carry. So if you're stuck between faith and doubt, between praying and wondering if it matters, stay with me. There's more to this silence than you think. It didn't come with thunder or lightning or angel choirs. It came in a memory. One night, lying awake, my heart numb and prayers worn thin, I remembered something small, a moment I hadn't thought about in years. I was sitting on a park bench. The air was cold. I had just gotten news that broke me in half. I had no words left to pray. And a little girl, maybe 5, maybe 6, walked past holding her mother's hand. She looked right at me and smiled. Not just any smile, the kind that feels like warmth, like light. I don't know why it hit me the way it did, but in that moment I felt something, not loud, not dramatic, just present. Like God hadn't left. Like maybe, just maybe, he was still there. It wasn't a miracle, it wasn't a breakthrough, but it was something. And sometimes, that's all we need. Sometimes the divine shows up in the smallest echoes. A lyric in a song that hits different. A sunset that slows your breath. A verse that reads like it was written just for you. A stranger's kindness that arrives when you're unraveling. And when those moments come, you feel it. Not always in your mind, not even in your body, but deep in your spirit. Something whispers, I never left. You're not alone. I'm still writing your story. And though it doesn't take the pain away, though the silence doesn't end in that second, it breaks the lie that God is far, that he's done, that he forgot. Because the truth is, even when you don't feel him, he feels you. Every sigh, every tremble, every time you close your eyes and whisper, please. He's there, not because you earned it, not because you proved your faith, but because he's always been love. And love doesn't abandon in the dark, so maybe that small memory wasn't random. Maybe that moment of warmth, that verse, that silence that felt different, maybe that was him. Not shouting, but whispering. Not fixing, but holding. Not giving answers, but giving presence. And in that, I remembered something I'd forgotten. God doesn't always speak in sound. Sometimes he speaks in stillness. Healing doesn't always feel like healing. Sometimes it feels like nothing's happening at all. You still wake up tired. You still cry for no reason. You still wonder if you'll ever feel whole again. But something has changed. Not outside you, inside. You stop asking for the pain to go away, and you start asking for the strength to carry it with grace. You stop chasing signs and wonders, and you start noticing how you're still breathing, even in the silence. You start realizing God's presence isn't always in the miracle. Sometimes it's in the survival. You didn't quit, you didn't run. You're still here, heart bruised, soul exhausted, voice trembling, but here. And that's sacred. Because faith isn't proven in loud declarations. It's found in the quiet yes you give to God when everything in you feels unsure. It's found in the moment you roll out of bed, even when the weight of the world says, stay down. It's found in the whisper, God, I don't understand, but I'm still yours. That's the soil where hope begins to grow again. Not fast, not flashy, but deep. Like roots in the ground, pushing through the dirt and stone, slowly rebuilding what you thought was gone. And somewhere in that quiet process, you begin to notice things you couldn't see before. A little more peace between the panic, a little more breath between the breakdowns, a little more clarity in the fog. It doesn't mean everything's fixed, but it means something sacred is being rebuilt, not on the surface, but at the core. And the most beautiful part? You didn't have to pretend to be strong for it to begin. You didn't have to pray perfectly. You didn't have to earn it. All you had to do was not give up. And maybe that's the whole point. Maybe the silence wasn't punishment, it was protection. Maybe the waiting wasn't absence, it was preparation. Maybe God wasn't far, he was close in ways you couldn't feel yet. Because now, without realizing it, you're standing on holy ground, not in a church, not in a miracle moment, but in your own quiet comeback, in your choice to believe, even with trembling hands. That's where the rebuilding starts. There's something sacred about reaching the end of yourself. When the prayers feel dry, the tears stop coming, and you're just still. Not because you gave up, but because you finally stopped trying to fix it all on your own. And it's in that stillness, the place where you stop performing, stop pretending, stop chasing answers, that you finally start hearing something deeper than words. Truth. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that settles in your spirit like a whisper from heaven. And here's what it says. You were never forgotten. You were never abandoned. You were never being punished. You were being held. Through every unanswered prayer, through every sleepless night, through every time you said, I can't do this anymore, and still woke up the next day. God wasn't teaching you to survive without him. He was teaching you to recognize him even when you couldn't feel him. Because real faith doesn't always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like ashes. But even from ashes, God breathes life. That silence you hated, it was making room to strip away the noise, the expectations, the performance, and bring you face to face with the real him. Not the version you were taught to fear, not the one who only shows up when you're good enough, but the one who sits beside you in the dark, who lets you cry, who doesn't rush your healing, who whispers, I'm here, without needing to say anything at all. And in that moment, the fear breaks, the shame loses its voice, and you start to see you were never alone, not even once. Even in the silence, God was moving, rebuilding, rerouting you in truth. Not so you could become better, but so you could become free. Free from needing proof, free from performing for love, free to rest in a faith that's real, raw, and steady, even in the storm. You may not have all the answers, you may still have questions, but now you know the silence wasn't empty, it was holy. So here you are, not fixed, not finished, but faithful, even if all you have left is a whisper. You made it through the silence, maybe not with clarity, but with courage, maybe not with answers, but with presence. And that's everything, because God never promised loud signs. He never guaranteed we'd understand. What he promised was himself. I will never leave you. I will be with you in the fire, When you walk through the valley, I am there. Not if you walk through it. When? This is the kind of faith that grows in the shadows, not in the spotlight, not in the miracle, but in the moments you kept going, simply because you believed he was still worth trusting. That kind of faith is unshakable, not because it never doubts, but because it survives the doubt. And now, even if you still feel a little lost, even if you still feel tired, there is a flicker in your soul, a softness, a sacred knowing. You were never abandoned. You were never alone. You were always, always being led. So I want to leave you with this prayer, not the kind you memorize, not the kind that sounds perfect, but the kind that comes from deep within the ache. God, I don't need the noise, I don't need the signs, I just need to know you're near. I trust you, even in the silence. Stay with me, breathe with me, carry me through. Amen. Let that settle. Let that prayer live in the quiet places of your heart. You don't have to force joy. You don't have to fake strength. You just have to return to the truth, to the stillness, to the God who never left. And if this helped you breathe again, come back tomorrow. We walk together. There's healing here, in the silence, in the prayers, in this community. You are seen, you are heard, you are loved, always.